Hello and good morning, everyone. Only Positivity here. I have my coffee with me, ready to kick off the eighth podcast on this series that I'm looking to launch. It's called Elevated Thoughts. So, before diving into the book and going into the actual talking points themselves, really what I'm doing here is, as I look to, pursue knowledge and life experience, um, I I have formed one habit, I think very solidly, and it's reading. So, this podcast essentially is going to go through the books that I've been reading and some of the takeaways and the lessons learned and relating them back to an experience in my life. So, um, before diving into it, I guess I'll start off with today's story, um, which is not as funny, I guess, but it's a little bit more interesting, I'd say. So, yesterday, me and my fiance and a couple other folks, we went to the food tasting for my wedding, and it was a really interesting and elegant experience. And they put on a great show for us, and they really showcased their skills and everything, which was nice. So essentially, there was a chef, and he was gonna prepare all the options that we had for our appetizers, super salad, and the entree. So there's like six appetizers, I think, two soups, two salads, and I think four entrees. So, what they would do is they would bring the actual portion, like the life-size portion, and put it in front of you, but then they would give you a smaller version of it, which was really like cute, if I can say that. So, um, essentially, we went through all the courses. We selected our appetizers, entrees, soups, and whatnot. And what the whole time what I was thinking, which was really interesting that this popped into my mind, was a chef, what he does is he essentially prepares something like at least this guy was at least prepping for an hour before we came for all the food that he cooked, and within 10 minutes it's all gone. And I thought that was a really transparent example of what being detached from your work really means, right? It's not all about the end outcome, it's more about the process and the lessons learned along the way. But I think an even better example of that was when we were doing our dessert tastings, right? They did the cakes for the wedding and everything like that, and seeing some of the pictures that the pastry chef had put together already was phenomenal. Just like the intricacy of the piping, the different colors, and the styles of the cake. One was like a Chicago skyline. And there was just it was just to the T with the different options and the way we can customize, and all the flavors were just phenomenal. So they put on a great show for us. But what I thought that took me back to this documentary that I'd watched, I think on National Geographic or like the History Channel, where these monks were they had these bronze pipes, and they were doing like this sand art, and they have all these different colors of sand, and they're making these intricate designs with these bronze pipe, and just putting the sand in there and slowly hitting it and letting the sand come out. And it takes them hours, and they do it for days and days and days, and then finally when it's all done, they just blow it away immediately. And it's just such a good practice in, right, staying detached from the end outcome or the results, not worrying about the results, more so the process. But anyway, so I really want to say that. I really want to have that conversation with a chef, but I really didn't want to go that deep when I just met everyone on that day, because I think that would be a really hard flex if I just went like deep into like a spiritual experience straight away with this person. But anyway, just an interesting story, an interesting experience that we had yesterday. And I think, you know, uh, just the idea of doing that, like, how often are we that conscious about being detached from the end outcome, not worrying about the result, but just kind of doing our best and that being enough. So, just an interesting example, right? Like I said, not a funny story, but I think it just that's what resonated with me from that interaction. So, coming back to elevated thoughts today, we're going to be going through the last part of Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. So, at level setting, this book is all about being present in the moment. So not dwelling on the past or the future, but being here now. So the first thing we'll go into is just some high level bullets, and I'm going to expand on all of these as we go through all the talking points. So um, so we'll talk about living in the now. So not living in the past or the future. So the first example that Eckhart Tolle used is um, in Russia, China, and a lot of other countries. Millions of people were killed for the cause of communism, which ultimately claimed a better future, right? So um, he says this is a solid example of how the idea of salvation in the future can often cause hell in the present. And living in the future, he can even classify as a mental illness. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, but always be wary of people who are constantly waiting. And what that means is, when I get this, I'll do that. So once I have more money, I'll do this. Once I have more time, I'll do this, right? Additionally, so talk about people who believe, right? Not to bring religion into it. People who believe salvation is just right around the corner, and that can mean in any regard, right? Say, okay, it's right over there. I just have to wait it out, and I'll get it, right? If, like I said, going back to the fact of when I have more resources, I'll do this. When I have more mental capacity, I'll do this, right? But right now, I just can't. So it's being wary of our tendency to always be waiting. And then talking about fulfillment. Where does your fulfillment come from? Is it short-lived? Is it, confined to going out, having drinks, food, consuming food? Is that where your fulfillment is coming from? Um, be wary or be cognizant of where you're attaining fulfillment from. Um, are you always focused on attaining that next thing or that next thrill or that next car or that next job, the next paycheck, things like that? Be wary of constantly living in the future because your current life situation will suffer, or it'll lose its its tenacity, it'll lose its vibrancy, it'll lose its novelty if we're always living in the future or in the past. And then we'll go into how people, we touched on this in the last one, but we'll go into how people have a tendency to create problems for themselves. But right, just laying off the talking points, and then we're going to go deeper into it in the next portion of the podcast. So, the first thing we talked about was, and I just touched on it, the need for people to create their own problems. So, I think one good exercise to do is take a second, and it can be right now. Take a second and think about all the problems that you have in your life. Whatever pops into your mind, right? It could be your student loans, a stressful work situation, something with your family life, significant other, parents, siblings. Um, so Eckhart Tolle will say the solution is if you don't become more aware and more conscious, you'll still face those same problems. Those problems will never go away. And and a classic example of this is people thinking that money will solve their issues, after a certain point. So, I'll bring it to an example of mine, right? To not always talk in high level bullets. Um, so when I graduated college, I thought getting an entry level, like, or getting into a big four accounting firm was going to be the path for me, or was going to bring me the most fulfillment, and I was going to be happy, and I wasn't going to need anything else. And so, I got that job at Deloitte, and it was good. I was in a big firm, and I thought I was going to be have the most fulfillment from my career, and that was going to be enough for me for the rest of my life. And definitely wasn't. And right, so I'm on a search for fulfillment, like if you can call it that now. And one thing I can say is after a certain point, trust me, money is not going to bring any more fulfillment. And that's one thing I can say with 100% confidence. So, creating a problem for myself, in this way, and assuming money is going to bring me more happiness, even though my life situation could become different. I could, live in a nicer place, have a nicer car. Um, that's not a solution. So that is me covering up or facading the pain with a new car, the next shiny thing. So I'll cover that up with something materialistic, so I don't have to actually think about a resolution, or chasing down some deeper fulfillment. So, um, one way to really resolve this issue, and Eckhart Tolle goes really deep into it in the book, but I think it'd be a good exercise for people to go into that chapter and really dive into it. But just stop, right? Just stop and look around. Okay, just look around at your surroundings. Stop worrying about the future. Just take a second, go for a walk, take in the colors, like he goes into like hear your feet, on the pavement, crunching the leaves, feel the breath going in and out of your body, right? Just take a second and look around. And then really dive into your problems. Realize that there are no things such as problems if you don't label them as problems. And I think that's really powerful, right? If you don't label a situation as a problem, then it really isn't. It's just a situation that you have to deal with, right? Um, so you just take a step back, realize, are you making that a problem? Because then that's your choice. If you turn that situation into a problem, you have chosen that. So just choose not to make it a problem anymore, right? So he used an example of like being in a life or death situation. So I don't know if anyone has ever been in one. I don't think I've been in a life or death situation, um, but I can understand the principle where he says if you're in a life or death situation, you just have to act, right? You don't have time to complain or stress. You just have to act in that moment. Your fight or flight, instinct kicks in. So what if we treated all interactions, um, with that similar premise or that similar mindset, where I'm just going to have an objective reaction to this event. I'm going to either accept it, um, I'm either going to change it, or I'm going to just take an action and figure out a solution, right? So there's there's different ways to deal with events, but I think coming from an objective view really clears the mental capacity for an objective solution. So, moving on from that, I think that's we'll get off creating problems for yourself, and I think the solution is to enjoy being, right? Enjoy being here now. So, one thing Eckhart Tolle uses is an example found in the Gita, right? Which is called karma yoga, which is not being concerned with the fruit of your action, but rather enjoy the doing rather than the achievement, right? Um, so this way, you're not attached to the results. Okay, so s- when we have a tendency to be very happy when we win something, right? When we see the fruits of our labor, and that's natural, right? And then we become sad when we don't see it, right? And so to avoid that, don't be attached to the results, because that way, if you fail or if you succeed, it doesn't matter. Your happiness comes from the process of it, from the doing. We don't tie our happiness to the end result, but did we do our best in that effort? So, like he goes back into talking about the unconscious mind, right, where emotions take over and you're reactive, um, and that's where your mind is ultimately controlled by your emotions and thoughts. So, he goes into an example of how we inflict pain on ourselves by being in that state. So he uses an example of there being low static in the background, this constant buffering or this little buzzing, and this being, and he associates that with this constant state of being in unease, right? This constant need to be doing something. And I can relate that back to myself. um, I always feel like I should be doing something, or I should be doing something more, or I'm not doing enough. Whether it's adding on another exercise at the gym, or getting that next job, moving up in the corporate world, right? Going from manager to senior manager, senior manager to director. Sometimes I want to meditate more. It's so difficult to find just quiet time, and I wish I could meditate more than 10 to 15 minutes a day. Or I wish I could sit down and make more podcasts or spend more time doing this or, talking with people. Um, what about starting a family down the road, right? All these things can really weigh down on you if you start thinking about them in detail. So, when I start finding myself doing that, I just force myself to unplug, right? I have to go to a place where there's no electronics and I feel kind of isolated and I can leave everything outside and I can just reflect and, just if anything, just be in a quiet space and control my breathing and just focus on my breathing so I can just calm down. And for me, that's being in the sauna. Usually, there's no one in the sauna when I go there, so I spend some time by myself, and I just essentially just try to control my heart rate, and slowly but surely, I reason and work through everything that's on my mind. And then you start realizing there's no need to create an issue for yourself when one doesn't exist, right? You go back to all I can do is either change or accept the situation and just not worry about the consequences, right? I just have to take action the best way I know how. Um, but so I think one thing that's also very important in terms of this emotional intelligence and journey and things like that is to really gauge your level of consciousness or how quickly your emotions take over when there is a challenging situation, right? Um, so I can claim, right, myself personally, I can claim to be this super tranquil guy who doesn't react. But if I lose my cool when something minor happens, then is it really there? So, like for example, like if I go to the store and let's say right now with everything going on with the coronavirus and everything like that, let's say I go to the store and I have an interesting interaction or somebody is like bumping me out of the way to get something. If I lost my cool in those situations, then all this emotional intelligence business that we're talking about right now would hold no weight, right? So it's really in the moments, our day-to-day interactions, right? It's not always some grand gesture, or it's not always sometimes someone's going to be berating us in public. It's just those little nuances. Am I going to keep my cool in those moments, or am I going to let my emotions take over? Things like that. Some people are up for that challenge, right? Some people are up for the challenge of when your emotions start building up, really, really working through them, really calming yourself down. Others will, take the easy route and go ahead and have that emotional reaction and, just kind of brush it off to the side. But, it's those type of behaviors that over time accumulate into a lot of distress and, a lot of mental capacity wasted. So, moving into that, transitioning to the next topic, right? Always providing a solution is wherever you are, be there 100%, be there totally. And this sounds very simple. And I think it's supposed to sound simple. But the next time you find yourself in any situation and you should try to react or at least try this exercise. When you're in a tough situation, think about these three options that you have, right? You can either remove yourself from the situation, you can change the situation, or you can accept that situation. Choose one of those three. There has to be some action that falls underneath each of those bullets. So whatever action you do choose, just accept the consequences of it, right? So if you're in a situation where, let's say, I'll use an example of just being sometimes being at my parents' house for too long, right? Sometimes I'll stay there for too long, and my mom wants me to stay there for a long time, and there's no problem. It's not that I don't like being there, but after a little while, it's time to go, right? You can feel things starting to get a little tense, and I'm just ready to scutter on out. So. Um, when I start feeling that, I say, okay, you know what? I'm starting to get a little uneasy here, and I have these three options, okay? And I can remove myself from the situation. I can attempt to change it, right? And I can accept it. So as I feel a tension rising, I can either leave, right? And that's 99% of the time what I do. I can try to change it. I can try to like be overly positive, or I can try to steer the conversation in certain directions and be very active in that way. And I think that would require more effort, to be honest. So I'll definitely tell myself that I'm taking the lazy route out, or I can just accept that it's gonna go potentially downhill, and I can just accept the consequences of saying, "Hey, I chose this. I chose to stay. I didn't choose to, alter the course of conversation, and I didn't leave." So I think that to me takes out all emotion, right? I just had these three options and I selected one of them and then I accepted whatever was going to come after. So, very basic example and might not have been the best one, but those are the kind of situations I face, on the day to day. Um, so going forward, so not just with these types of interactions that I just mentioned, whatever action that you guys choose, right? Just do it fully. So, kind of the example that I can illustrate here is, who's ever been in a situation where they like kind of do something all day, right? They potentially or like half complete something for the whole day, right? I'll say like sometimes I got the TV on, I could be like passively reading, I want to go fully engage in a workout, but I'm like kind of too tired. I was supposed to cook like a really healthy meal. But instead, I just kind of snack a little bit on some strawberries or blueberries. So I'm just feeling like kind of for the day, right? So, um, Eckhart Tolle says, if you're in that laziness mood, just go into it, go deep into it, right? Just feel that laziness for that day, right? Take that time to recharge, and then whatever activity you have to do it fully, right? So, like bringing it back to that example I just said, like if I was gonna, be if I needed a day to myself that day, instead of like half doing something or half-heartedly doing things, just take the time to recharge, right? Take the time to recharge so when you do whatever you're doing, right? Working, um, going to the gym, do it fully, go hard, right? Things like that. And I think one thing to work with, one thing like to bring an example, right, back to my life is the gym, right? So I'm someone who goes to the gym every day, okay? But what I used to do is I used to go super hard every day. I would my work I would be at the gym for like 2 hours, for like 7 to 14 days straight, and then I would just like not go to the gym then for like a week and a half because I was just burnt out. So like now, usually what I do and the way it's been going is, I'll do one like intense lift day, and then one day at Orange Theory, which is also intense, and then I'll do a day where I just go to the gym and I walk on the treadmill for like 30 minutes, and then I go on the bike for 15 minutes, and I stretch for a long time. I do some push-ups and pull-ups, and I go to the sauna for 15 minutes. So that's my day to recharge. But I work in that day, right? So when I'm at the gym, I'm still doing that, but I'm fully engaged in it. And then that sets me up for the days where I'm going intense to really go intense. I'm no guru, right? I'm no fitness guy, model or anything like that, but it helps me really get the most out of what I'm doing and the activities I'm engaging in. Um, so in the beginning, few points we talked about, habitually waiting, right? Be wary of people who are waiting. And I think a couple questions to ask yourself right now is, um, are you waiting to start living? Or how much of your life do you spend waiting, right? And I'm not talking about like small scale waiting, like at the post office or, waiting for that next piece of equipment to open up at the gym or a DMV line or anything like that. I'm talking about large scale waiting. And that's things like waiting for the next job, or, I'll wait for more money, or I'll wait for the right person to come along, or, the common one, I'll wait for retirement to do this. Um, so that goes back to that anxiety gap that we were talking about, where you want what you don't have, and essentially what that means is what you have right now isn't enough. So we really have to catch ourselves when we do this. So we always have to be grateful for what we have right now, because the situation could always be worse. Um, and but you have to enjoy what you have right now. And that's not to say we shouldn't be pushing forward or be forward thinking. But that's the challenge of this all, right? You want to push forward, you want to be ambitious, but you want to enjoy the moment as well. So it's this balance you have to find between being in the moment but also always elevating yourself. So, one thing that I thought is that when I got my new job, I would, get some more fulfillment. And to some extent, the additional funds you get, I guess, with moving up, gives you the opportunity to do more things that could potentially bring you more fulfillment. So yes, I have more funds to travel and I guess, pursue knowledge. But if I wasn't conscious of it, right? If I wasn't like, hey, now that I'm able to do certain things, I should spend the money that I have on the right things, in my opinion, right? There's certain areas of my life that I'm not looking to elevate with, which is like my car. I guess that's one of them, where I have a Honda Accord. I'll probably get another Honda Accord, right? But one thing that I really don't mind spending my money on is traveling, and things like that, because that brings me fulfillment, brings me life experience, perspective. But that's just me. So anyway, going back to the topic is the next job I get, or if I get one, the next job isn't going to bring me any more fulfillment, I think, right? I think it's the fact that I'm always looking to do my best, right? So I don't think the job itself is what's bringing me fulfillment. It's just the fact that I'm able to get into a new environment, I'm able to adapt to it, and I'm able to thrive in it, right? Every new job that I get is a new challenge, and I really take that challenge to work myself in there and really bring value to that organization because it's me always attempting to do my best. So, um, just some food for thought. I know these habits are very tough to implement, and you always have to be conscious, but that's part of the exercise. So I challenge everyone to just always be conscious, always be intentional with your actions, and always be aware, and self-reflect, self-observe. So that's all I got for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to leave me any feedback, and remember, only positivity. Thanks, guys.